Run! It was the only word screaming inside my mind as I plunged through the dark alleyway in downtown Chicago. My breath splintering my chest, burning as if set on fire, my legs threatening to collapse beneath me at any second. Behind me were the pounding, urgent footsteps of Ryan's men, each stride closing the distance. "Emma, come back here!" Ryan's voice crashed against the cold, damp brick walls, sharp and heavy with menace. "You know you can't escape me." But I was escaping. I had to escape, because if he caught me, if those hands touched my body one more time, I would not survive it, not this time. I was Emma Blake, 27 years old, and 3 hours earlier, I had finally gathered enough courage to walk away from the man who had worn me down to nothing, body and soul, for 2 long years. Ryan Callahan, polished brilliant, a young tech visionary, praised by American media, but behind closed doors, he was a nightmare clothed in human skin. Ryan carved me away from my friends and family, severing each connection, until everyone believed I was unstable and paranoid. Every time I had tried to leave before he found me within a few hours. This time I prepared better. No suitcase, no warning to anyone. Months of hiding cash, waiting for the night he drank himself into oblivion so I could run. But I was wrong. He woke up early, and now I was being hunted through every corner of Chicago by a team of former soldiers. Neon lights blurred overhead, the tall buildings towered like soulless walls, and the road ahead stretched endlessly like a trap. I burst out of the alley and onto a wide avenue near River North, where a few luxury cars were still parked along the curb. No taxis, no police, no one who could help. My eyes darted in pure desperation, and then I saw it, a sleek black SUV pulled close to the curb, tinted windows, engine still warm as if recently shut off. The back door was unlocked. I had no choice. I yanked it open, slipped inside, pressed myself flat against the floor, my hands trembling violently as I gently pulled the door closed, praying no one had seen me. Footsteps passed by, voices muffled through the glass, my own ragged breathing stifled by terror, until I had to cover my mouth to keep silent. Ryan's men ran past and the sound faded. I exhaled a shuddering breath of relief. And then I heard the driver's door open. God, someone had come back to the car. I froze. My entire body locked on the floor, too afraid to move, too afraid to breathe. Maybe he wouldn't look down. Maybe I could still get away. The engine started. The car rolled forward. "I know you're down there." A low, unhurried, completely calm voice filled the space. "I can hear you breathing, and I can see you in the mirror." I shut my eyes, my heart pounding so violently it hurt, wishing I had imagined it. "You can stay curled on the floor like that," he continued in that same, unnervingly steady tone. "Or you can sit up and explain why you broke into my car in the middle of the night in Chicago." There was no escape left. My hands shook so badly I had to grip the seat to pull myself up. The first thing I met in the rearview mirror were his eyes, dark as the city's night, deep and sharp, but not remotely frantic. The stranger looked about 37, his black hair slightly tousled, as if he had just walked out of a long meeting, his perfectly tailored dark suit wrapped around broad shoulders, and a frame built with quiet strength. The kind of man you could tell with one glance was not harmless. I am sorry," I rasped, my voice raw and tangled with uneven breath. "They were chasing me. I didn't know where else to hide. Who are they? The men who work for my ex-boyfriend, a very dangerous man. Please just drop me somewhere with lights, with people." No. One word sharp as a blade. Ice slid down my spine. "What did you say?" "I am not dropping you off. You got into my car. That makes you my problem now." His words sealed off every path I had left. I did not know who this man was, but my instincts whispered one truth with terrifying clarity. I had just run from one monster and thrown myself straight into the world of another who might be even more dangerous. Yet that night, in a speeding SUV, cutting through a sleeping Chicago, caught between an old fear and a new one, I had no way of knowing what waited ahead. I only knew one thing. I had survived a few more minutes, and sometimes a few minutes are enough to change an entire life. If you are still listening, then perhaps you are like me, someone who once stood in that hollow space, where it felt as if there was nothing left to hold on to, someone who longed for a place just safe enough to breathe again. If this story has reached into any quiet corner inside you, please click like, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with anyone who might also be searching for a way out. I would love to know where you are hearing this from, so leave a comment below and tell me which city and which state you call home. Because if my story has found its way to you, then I know hope is still spreading out there in the world, and you are not alone. The man did not turn his head to look at me. He kept his eyes on the road, his hands resting on the steering wheel, with a kind of frightening composure. I pulled myself tight against the back seat, my heart still pounding violently inside my chest, unable to tell whether I had just escaped or wandered into a new circle of danger. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. The only sounds were the whisper of the tires against the damp pavement and my uneven, heavy breaths that had not yet settled. Finally, he broke the silence with a low voice, gentle in a way that felt almost ordinary. "What is your name?" I swallowed hard. "Emma. Emma Blake." His eyes flicked toward me in the mirror again, this time studying me with more intention. I realized that his gaze held no threat, only a kind of assessment, as if he were quietly determining what level of trouble I represented. "And him? The one chasing you? Who is he?" I bit my lip, hesitated for a heartbeat, then answered. "Ryan Callahan. He used to be my boyfriend." My voice trembled as I said his name. He does not accept that I left." One of the man's eyebrows lifted slightly, though his expression did not change. "Ryan Callahan. The tech CEO who likes to use money to hide the rot underneath." I stiffened. "You know him. I know his reputation. I know the type. And I am not impressed." For the first time since I entered the car, a small spark of hope flickered inside me. Maybe, just maybe, I had not stepped into the worst possible place. But when I reached instinctively for the door handle, his voice rose again, steady and unmistakable. "Locked." I tried the door behind me. It did not move exactly as he had said. "What? What are you going to do to me?" "Nothing. If I intended to do something, you would not still be talking right now." His calmness was far more terrifying than any threat. "Then, let me out. I do not want to bother you." "No." Once again his voice cut through every attempt at resistance. "You climbed into my car and brought your trouble with you. Now that trouble is mine, and I do not allow any kind of trouble to exist without being handled." I tightened my fists, feeling my chest constrict. I could not understand why this man had decided to keep me here. I was only a runaway with nothing to offer, nothing of value, nothing to trade. But he was different. He handled the expensive SUV as if it were an extension of his own body, moving through the night streets with practiced ease, needing no navigation. The dark suit, the voice, the gaze, everything about him carried one unmistakable truth, that this was not a man who merely had money. This was a man with power. Old power. The kind no one dares to ask the origin of. I pulled myself smaller into the seat, my voice shaking. "Who are you?" He was silent for a few seconds. Then he answered, brief and unadorned. "Cole. Cole Bennett." The name meant nothing to me at first until I suddenly remembered hearing it somewhere long ago. A shadowy tycoon behind underground real estate dealings in Chicago. A name that never appeared on the front page, yet always made people in that world tread carefully. So I had escaped the claws of a wealthy madman and stepped straight into the car of someone whispered across the city to be far more dangerous. "What do you want from me?" My voice softened to almost nothing. A quiet pause, then Cole spoke, slow and deliberate. "I want to know why a woman in a thin shirt with no purse and no plan could make a group of bodyguards who used to be special forces chase her through the night. I want to know exactly what you were running from. And I want to be certain that whatever it is will not pull me into deeper trouble." I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry as paper. And if I tell you, what will you do? It depends. If I decide what you bring is uncontrollable, I will stop the car and let you fend for yourself. But if I decide to keep you, then you accept one condition. What condition? You owe me. Because you brought yourself to my door. Because you forced me to deal with this. And I always collect what I am owed. No one escapes that. He did not shout. He did not threaten. It was simply a truth spoken the way someone might speak of tomorrow's weather. But something in his voice made me believe him. Believe or die. I did not know which choice was worse. I sat in silence, watching the darkness glide past the window. This time I no longer thought about running. I thought only about surviving, and about the price I would one day pay for the small piece of safety Cole Bennett had just placed in my trembling hands. The SUV glided quietly through the dimly lit streets as the night in Chicago sank deeper into its stillness, and I sat motionless in my seat, my breathing finally steady, though my mind refused to calm, spinning in frantic circles. Cole's final words echoed in my head like a dull blade dragging slowly across skin. You owe me. And I always collect what I am owed. No one escapes. I did not know exactly what kind of man he was, but something instinctive inside me whispered that I had stumbled into a world ruled not by any laws I recognized, not by police or courts, but by unspoken bargains where the price of entry was never as simple as an apology. I stole a glance at the man steering with one hand, his eyes locked on the road, yet utterly relaxed, every movement radiating absolute control. He was not angry, not irritated, not even mildly bothered that a stranger had slipped into his car in the middle of the night. But it was that calmness that frightened me most. People who do not need to raise their voices to command obedience are always the most dangerous. I gathered what little courage I had left, forcing my voice not to tremble. What do you mean that I owe you? I took nothing from you. He did not turn his head, only let out a faint breath that felt almost like quiet amusement. You did not need to take anything. Your presence in my car bringing your trouble with you is enough to create a debt. I frowned uneasy with the way he spoke, as if everything had already been decided long before I entered his path. Then what? What are you going to make me do to repay it? He fell silent for a long moment, long enough that I wondered if he intended to answer at all. Then he turned onto a narrower, emptier street and stopped the car by the curb, shutting off the engine without saying a word. I held my breath. Cole finally turned his head, looking at me directly for the first time, instead of through the mirror, and up close, his eyes were even colder and deeper than I had imagined, like a winter lake sealed in ice, beautiful, in a way that could kill you if you stepped too close. I do not need anything from you. Not yet. But the moment you chose to hide in my car, you placed yourself under my protection. And that comes with responsibility. I protect you. In return, when I ask, you will answer. In the way I choose. My heart slammed hard against my ribs, the words sounding like a promise and a sentence at the same time. I did not know what made him say it, whether it was pity, curiosity, or simply the instinctive recognition that I could be a piece on a board he controlled. I forced myself to stay steady, and if I refuse... He tilted his head slightly, his gaze unchanged. I do not force anyone to do what they do not want to do, but I do not guarantee the safety of anyone who refuses to follow my rules. So that was the truth. Safety was a price, and I was too desperate to bargain. I nodded softly, almost a whisper. I understand. Cole turned back and started the engine again, his voice low and dry, but weighted with certainty. Good. I do not repeat myself twice. We are almost there. I looked out the window, trying to recognize where we were, but the familiar streets had given way to silent, towering buildings, sleek and distant. I realized I no longer knew which part of the city we were in. A modern glass building appeared ahead, its doors opening automatically as the SUV approached. Cole drove straight into an underground garage. Everything was eerily quiet. No guards, no obvious cameras, No one checking anything. But I could feel eyes watching from somewhere in the shadows. When the car finally stopped, Cole switched off the engine and turned to me. "Get out. For now, this is where you will stay." I stared at him. You. You are letting me stay." He did not answer immediately. He only looked at me, his eyes no longer icy, but carrying something closer to a warning. "I do not leave a woman being hunted wandering the streets at night. But do not mistake this for kindness. This is an agreement. You are under my protection. And as I said, no one owes me without paying." Those words echoed in my mind as I followed him into the elevator, and when the doors slid shut and the soft chime sounded as it began to rise, I knew my life was stepping onto another level as well, into another world entirely, one I was not sure I was strong enough to survive, or one that might swallow me whole without leaving a trace. The elevator doors opened onto the top floor of the building, and I was instantly overwhelmed by the space before me, bathed in a soft golden light that fell across dark polished wood floors, while floor-to-ceiling glass walls unveiled the glittering night skyline of Chicago. Everything was so quiet, I could hear the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat as I stepped out of the elevator, my feet sinking into a thick carpet that felt like clouds. I could not believe the place was real. Cole's penthouse was unlike anything I had ever stepped into. It held none of the ostentatious extravagance Ryan used to favor: no gold plating, no loud artwork, no cluttered displays meant to impress. Here every detail felt intentional, restrained, perfectly curated. A large charcoal gray sofa anchored the living space, facing a sleek, recessed fireplace, where flames burned bright and steady, their glow reflected in the glass and dancing across the ceiling. In one corner stood a jet-black piano, silent, yet not lonely, as if it carried stories in its stillness. The entire place felt like a world sealed off from the chaos outside, a place where time slowed and noise could not follow. Cole set his keys on the table, removed his coat, and said nothing more, giving me only a brief glance before heading down the left hallway. I followed him instinctively, still unsure whether I was truly being allowed to stay. He opened the first door and motioned with his eyes. "In here. The guest room." When I stepped inside, the sense of awe washed over me all over again. The room was spacious and warm, with a wide glass window revealing the vast stretch of the city, and a neatly made bed with crisp white sheets and a thick comforter that looked soft enough to pull me under. A small bookshelf stood nearby, along with a warm bedside lamp and a neatly folded stack of towels. I turned back to Cole, who stood at the doorway with his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. "I can really stay here," I whispered, as though speaking too loudly might break whatever fragile miracle had taken shape. He gave a small nod. "For now. Lock the door when you are inside. The code is your birthday, but change it when you can." I froze. He knew my birthday. How could he know that? Cole turned away without answering. Whatever question rose in my mind was swallowed by a sudden wave of exhaustion. For the first time in so many years, I did not have to glance over my shoulder. I did not have to listen for footsteps. I did not have to brace myself in a dark room, flinching at every knock. I closed the door and leaned against it, letting out a long, shaking breath. These were the first seconds of what people might call safety. I walked slowly around the room, touching each object as if testing whether it truly existed. In the bathroom, I found clean towels scented with essential oils and a stream of hot water pouring with the strength of a river, and I cried under it, not from pain, but from relief, my body trembling as layers of street dust and fear I thought had fused into my skin finally washed away. When I returned to the bedroom, with damp hair and wrapped in a soft robe, there was a tray on the bed holding a bowl of hot soup, a few slices of toasted bread, and a glass of water. No note, no footsteps, but I knew it was from Cole. My hands shook as I lifted the spoon. Each warm sip eased down my throat like a quiet comfort I had long forgotten. I could not remember the last time I ate properly or the last time someone offered me anything without expectation or control. No words, no pitying looks, no demands. just a bowl of soup and silence. And I cried as I ate. When I finished, I set the tray aside, slipped beneath the soft white covers, and pulled the blanket to my chin. The city lights shimmered through the window, casting blurred reflections against the ceiling. My heart still beat too fast, my mind still spun in uneven circles, but for the first time in years, I drifted to sleep without wondering whether I would wake up the next morning. And as my eyes closed, I understood something I had forgotten long ago, that safety is not a place. It is a feeling. And that night, for the first time in so many years, I felt it. I woke to the sunlight slipping through the glass curtains, painting pale golden streaks across the ceiling, and the first thing I felt was unfamiliarity. The room was so quiet that it took me several seconds to remember where I was. The penthouse, Cole Bennett, the night I ran, the bowl of soup, the panic that still lingered somewhere behind my ribs, yet no longer controlled my every breath. I sat up, tightened the robe around me, and stepped barefoot into the living room, where morning light softened everything it touched. On the kitchen counter sat a handwritten note that read, "Breakfast. Stay inside. Do not open the door. C." Beside it was a warm cup of coffee and a neatly arranged plate of eggs and toast. I had no idea when Cole had left, but everything about him seemed planned long before I arrived. I had barely taken my seat when a sound broke the silence. It was not my phone. It was the smart TV in the living room switching on by itself as if activated remotely, the screen brightening with the logo of a national news network. And then a familiar face appeared, freezing me in place. Ryan, wearing a light gray suit, offering that thin smile he always used before performing for an audience, the company logo behind him glowing like a halo. He was holding a press conference, and I knew with cold certainty that this was no coincidence. Ryan never did anything without a reason. "Good morning," he began, his voice gentle, composed, as if he were announcing a new charitable project. "I am here today not as a businessman, but as a man who is hurting." My entire body tensed. I knew that tone. I knew that look. A predator making himself appear like prey. "Someone I love deeply," he continued. "Emma Blake, my girlfriend of 2 years, has disappeared under concerning circumstances." He paused for exactly the amount of time needed to stir emotion. "And I fear she may be in danger. She is not well. She has struggled with psychological issues for a long time and has required extended treatment. Recently, I noticed signs of relapse." I screamed inside my own head, not from anger but from terror. This was his plan, to paint me as unbalanced, fragile, unstable. Every word he spoke was calculated to shape public perception, to summon sympathy, to turn me into a troubled woman who needed to be found for her own protection. Ryan raised a photograph of me, slightly old but clearly recognizable, with a caption beneath it that read, "If you see Emma, please contact us. She may not be aware of her actions." I stepped back from the screen as if it could bite. I wanted to shout that he was lying, that I was not insane, that all I wanted was freedom. But Ryan did not need my voice. He only needed the audience to believe his. And now if anyone saw me, heard my name, read my story, they would believe I was a dangerously unstable woman wandering the streets, capable of anything. I felt trapped. Nowhere left to hide. No one left to call. Everything he said was not only an attack on my dignity, but a warning shot fired at anyone who might dare to shelter me. I turned to the penthouse door, the one Cole told me not to open, and a nameless question rose inside me. If Cole saw this press conference, what would he think? Would he believe me? Or would he see the same thing the rest of the world was being told to see: a liar, a threat, a complication that needed to be removed? I did not know, and that uncertainty was the sharpest fear of all. Ryan was not only hunting my body, he was hunting my identity, my truth, my voice. He was stripping them away piece by piece by making the world believe I was not sane enough to speak for myself. And I was standing in the one place that felt safe, not knowing how long that safety would last. I stood in that silent apartment while the screen replayed his words again and again, and only one thought echoed inside me. Ryan was not coming for me with force. He was coming with public opinion, and public opinion could kill me faster than any bullet. I remained standing there in the breathless silence of the room, staring at the screen, replaying Ryan's press conference, every word of his echoing through my mind, like a sentence with no chance of appeal. He had painted me as a madwoman, an unstable figure who needed supervision and saving, when he was the very nightmare I had been trying to escape. The elevator chimed softly, and I flinched, turning toward the sound. Cole stepped out with his coat draped over his arm, his face as unreadable as always, yet something in his eyes shifted when he glanced at the television, where Ryan continued to perform grief for the flashing cameras. I saw his lips tighten, his jaw clench just slightly. I could not tell if it was anger or disdain, but I knew he was assessing the situation, and that frightened me. He placed his coat across the back of a chair, stood still for a beat, then finally turned toward me. "Do you realize you are standing in the center of a storm, Emma?" I nodded faintly, unable to hide the exhaustion on my face. I do not know what to do anymore. Even if I speak the truth, who would believe me? My voice broke. He has done this before. He forced me to see his private therapist and had the records written the way he wanted. Now the whole world will believe him. I have no proof. I have no one on my side. Cole studied me with a piercing focus, as if lifting each thought in my mind to inspect it. Then he stepped closer, close enough that I could see every cold, defined line of his expression. I can shut him down. I can make every word he said meaningless. But I need something from you. I stepped back, my spine brushing the edge of the table. What? Cole did not answer immediately. He looked straight into my eyes, his voice low and steady. "You will pretend to be my girlfriend." I went still, my heart skipping hard inside my chest. "What? You must be joking." Cole raised one eyebrow. "I am not." He turned toward the bar, poured himself a glass of water, and continued in the tone of a man discussing a business arrangement. "You saw the press conference. Ryan is using the media to control the narrative, and he will keep using it to track you down. If you disappear, he will have even more reason to hunt for you. But if you appear in public beside me, a healthy, coherent woman living with a man of influence, every part of his story will look absurd." I stepped back as if the floor were shifting beneath me with each word he spoke. "You want me to pretend to love you? In public, in front of the media, in front of the entire world?" Cole set his glass down, his gaze never leaving mine. "I want you to be my girlfriend. Temporarily. On paper. In photos. In the eyes of the press. We will go public. We will appear together at a few events. We will live together as a real couple would. And to everyone watching, you will not be an unstable woman fleeing a relationship, but a woman who has simply chosen a new one, a relationship that is visible, solid, and protected." My mouth parted in disbelief. "But why me? You are Cole Bennett. You could choose anyone. A model, an actress, someone polished enough to match you." Cole stepped closer again, his gaze sharpening. "Because you are already my problem. I do not allow anything connected to me to remain outside my control. And you are at the center of a chaos I do not intend to be entangled in for long." I could not answer. 100 questions churned in my mind. Part of me wanted to run, to disappear from all of this forever. But another part, the part exhausted from being hunted, recognized the truth Cole was not offering. He was setting terms. And the only choice I had was to accept them, or return to being prey in Ryan's game. I lifted my head and looked into the eyes of the man standing before me. "If I do this, you guarantee I will be safe?" Cole tilted his head slightly, his gaze fixed on mine. "I guarantee it. As long as you play your role exactly as I demand. No lies, no impulsive decisions, and absolutely no betrayal." I swallowed hard, feeling as though I had stepped onto the edge of a cliff. But still I nodded. "Then it is a deal. You have me, your fake girlfriend." Cole did not smile. He simply stepped back, his eyes narrowing faintly as if calculating the next move. Good. We start tomorrow morning. And Emma, welcome to a different kind of escape, the kind where one wrong step will cost far more than tears. The next morning, I woke with a feeling so unfamiliar that it took me a moment to name it. It was neither fear nor relief. It was anticipation. Cole had been clear the arrangement began today. I was no longer Emma Blake fleeing through the night. I was about to become the girlfriend of Cole Bennett, a role that, if played poorly, could cost me not only my freedom, but perhaps my life. When I stepped out of the bedroom, I found Cole standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, a cup of coffee in hand, the morning light cutting across his shoulders in a way that made the sharpness of his face even more pronounced. He turned when he heard me nodding once. "Eat breakfast. Then get ready." I asked quietly. "Ready for what?" Cole did not answer right away. He took a slow sip of coffee, set the cup down, and looked at me as if I were a project undergoing reconstruction. "You cannot appear next to me with a frightened face and eyes that look like they are moments away from tears. If you want people to believe you are mine, you must look the part. And belief begins with image." He made a short phone call, and less than an hour later the doorbell rang. 3 women and 2 men stepped into the penthouse, all dressed beautifully and professionally, carrying suitcases, color boards, makeup kits, and laptops. A woman with platinum hair, pulled into a high ponytail, walked toward me and shook my hand as though I were a star who had just signed a $1 million contract. "I am Vanessa, Cole's personal stylist. Today we discover the best version of you. Are you ready?" I did not know if I was. But when Vanessa opened her cases and revealed perfectly tailored outfits, expensive lipsticks, and high heels straight from magazine covers, I understood that this was not a game. This was a campaign, a transformation, a rebirth. They began with my hair, then makeup. When I finally looked in the mirror, I saw a woman with steady eyes instead of lost ones, soft waves framing her face, dark red lips and lashes curled high enough to sharpen her entire expression. Vanessa rested a hand on my shoulder while I stared at my reflection in disbelief. "You do not need to hide behind fear anymore. You are not the victim. You are the one in control." Then came the clothing. I tried on at least 10 outfits, from elegant office dresses to form-fitting evening gowns. Vanessa approved only when I walked out wearing a black jumpsuit that hugged my body perfectly, with a deep V neckline, half sleeves, and a slim belt that defined every clean line. Not flashy, not fragile, just powerful enough to make people take a step back. When I stepped out of the fitting room, Cole was already waiting. His eyes moved over me from head to toe. He said nothing, offered no compliment or critique, but there was something unmistakable in his gaze, something like acknowledgement. "Good. Now you can stand beside me. But do not forget, the eyes of this entire city will be on you. One wrong move and both of us will pay for it." I nodded, lifting my chin slightly, feeling perhaps for the first time in months that I held even a sliver of control in my own story. We left the penthouse when the sun was high. A sleek black car waited in the garage below, and the security guard opened the door for me as if I had always belonged to that world. Sitting beside Cole in the back seat, I caught my reflection in the window. I was no longer the wide-eyed woman with a shattered gaze. I was someone else, clear, quiet, and ready to fight. Today would be the first event where we appeared together. And if I could not outrun Ryan with fear, then this time I would face him with something entirely different, an image he could not manipulate. A woman who no longer bowed her head. A woman he could no longer control. When the car stopped in front of a stately old mansion in the northern part of Chicago, I felt my stomach tighten. Warm yellow light spilled through the windows of the 3-story ivy-covered house, giving it a deceptively gentle glow, like a trap wrapped in silk. Cole stepped out first and held out his hand for me, his palm cool and steady, the kind of steady one has before stepping into a strategic meeting rather than a family dinner. When the door opened, the first person I saw was likely his mother, tall with silver hair pinned neatly at the back of her head, her sharp gaze seeming to read me the very moment it swept across my face. Cole introduced me quickly, his voice low and even, as always. "This is Emma. She is my girlfriend." She gave a slight nod, not a greeting, but a temporary acceptance. We entered the dining room, where everyone else was already seated. I recognized his father, a salt-and-pepper-haired man, with the stern composure of someone who once commanded a sizable team, and a middle-aged man with a broad, easy smile who might have been an uncle or cousin. And then there was a young woman with keen eyes and a thin smile examining me as if I were an item displayed behind glass, Cole's younger sister Lauren. The moment I stepped inside, I could feel the tension stretch tight across the room like a wire. Unspoken questions hung between the glances. They wanted to know who I was, why I had appeared so suddenly at Cole's side, a man known for his cold reserve, a man who had never publicly acknowledged any relationship. Throughout dinner, I had to focus intensely recalling every detail Cole had instructed, how to address each person, what topics to avoid, and above all, how to remain composed. I sat beside him, smiling softly at stories nodding, when prompted speaking only enough to avoid suspicion. Cole played the role of boyfriend so flawlessly that I found myself wondering how much of it was an act. He pulled out my chair, chose the dishes I preferred, rested a hand lightly on my back as we left the table and cast a possessive glance my way whenever someone looked too long. But Lauren would not let the evening pass quietly. She watched me propped her chin on her hand and asked with feigned innocence, "So, Emma, how long have you two known each other?" I answered just in time, 3 weeks. But it feels longer than that. My reply stalled the room for a single beat before Cole spoke without hesitation. "She is different. Sometimes it does not take long to know someone is real." It was a simple sentence, but I could feel his parents studying us as though they were examining an antique for authenticity. Lauren laughed lightly and poured more wine into her glass. "I only worry that my brother is finally letting himself feel something for someone who may not fit the world he has built." I met her eyes, calm but firm. "I understand, but I am not here to break anything. I am here to stand beside him." My response made her pause, not because I was clever, but because I was not as fragile as she expected. Dinner ended when the clock struck 8:30, and Cole rose with deliberate ease, signaling for us to leave. As we approached the door, his father shook my hand. His gaze no longer as cold, and his mother, though not smiling, looked at me for the first time without the distance of a stranger. Lauren said nothing. When the car rolled away from the stone path, I exhaled deeply, nearly sinking into my seat. I turned to Cole to ask something, but he spoke first. "You did well." I stayed silent, though inside my thoughts churned. This had not been a dinner. It had been a test, and I had passed it. But from the look in Lauren's eyes, I knew I had not truly been accepted. To her, I remained an unknown variable, one that could disrupt the carefully aligned orbit of Cole Bennett. And I was not certain the next encounter would be as simple as tonight. 3 days after the dinner at Cole's home, I began to realize something unsettling, that in the quiet penthouse where only Cole and I were supposed to live there seemed to be something else. A presence that moved softly and silently, like a shadow just behind me, always close, yet never visible. Every morning when I woke, small things I had left out of place the night before were set neatly back where they belonged. A book I had never touched lay open in the middle, my favorite tea disappearing faster than it should, even though I remembered clearly never drinking it. I told myself Cole might have staff coming in, but he was the kind of man who controlled every detail, every threshold crossed. One afternoon when I returned from a fitting session with Vanessa, I found Lauren sitting comfortably in the living room, her legs crossed, a glass of red wine in hand, like a socialite from an old film, her gaze pinned on me as though I were an intruder. I froze, unsure how to react, but she spoke first, her voice sweet with an edge so fine it felt like steel wrapped in silk. "I came to check on my brother. It has been a while. But it seems he is not alone anymore." I took a seat across from her, struggling to steady myself. Cole is not home. He is in a meeting. Lauren nodded slightly and swirled her wine, her eyes never leaving mine. You know Cole is not an easy man to love. He does not trust easily, especially not with someone new. I gave a faint smile. Then I suppose I must be an exception. Perhaps. But it is strange to me that he suddenly appears with a woman no one has ever seen, calling her his girlfriend, after years of silence. You are not a stranger. Cole knows exactly why you are here. She paused a beat, then smiled as though I had just confessed something. I said nothing. I did not deny. I did not confirm. I understood her type, the kind of person who does not need proof, only a small crack to bring down an entire structure. Lauren walked closer, until her face hovered inches from mine, close enough for me to see each dark lash framing her sharp eyes. I do not know who you are yet, but I will. I have ways, and if you hurt Cole even a little, you will not be dealing with just one person. I lifted my chin, refusing to look away. I did not come here to hurt anyone. But I am too tired to run anymore. Lauren narrowed her eyes as though committing something about me to memory, then turned and left the click of her heels sharp against the wood floor. When the door closed behind her, I let out a long breath. In the place I thought would be a refuge, there was now another watcher, another pair of eyes tracing my every step. And I began to understand that surviving in Cole's world required more than staying ahead of Ryan. It meant passing every test set by the people who thought they stood at Cole's side. And Lauren was the first to determine what I truly was: a pawn, a pretender, or someone becoming something even I never expected, a piece of the very power I once believed lived only in the shadows. That morning, when I stepped out of the bedroom, everything in the penthouse looked as orderly as it always did, yet the air felt different, unnaturally quiet, cold and dense, as though the whole place were holding its breath with me. Cole stood in the kitchen with his phone in hand, staring at the screen as if hypnotized. He did not look up when I approached, and it was only when I touched his arm that he finally spoke, his voice rougher and lower than usual. We have a problem. I looked at the screen and saw an article on a major news site published less than half an hour earlier. The headline blazed in bold letters: "The mysterious girlfriend of Cole Bennett is Emma Blake, the woman Ryan Callahan is searching for, in a shocking psychological scandal." My heart dropped. I read the lines without believing my own eyes. They had photos of me standing beside Cole at a small event 3 days earlier, another of me getting out of his car while a security guard held the door. The angle was distant enough to blur my expression, but clear enough to identify me. The article repeated every word Ryan had said in his press conference, stitching his narrative seamlessly to my presence beside Cole. They suggested I had not disappeared at all, but was hiding with a powerful figure in the city's underground financial world, and might be leveraging the relationship to avoid legal consequences tied to alleged mental instability. Not a sentence was true, yet every line was written with the polished certainty of a well-crafted investigation. I turned to Cole, my palms going cold. Who did this? Who leaked my identity? Cole stayed silent for several seconds before exhaling, his eyes still fixed on the article. It could be Lauren, or someone on the security team, or someone from your past who recognized you. The story is out, and it will spread quickly. We cannot stay here any longer. He grabbed his phone and instructed someone named Marcus to prepare Destination 2, as if they had mapped every contingency long before I arrived. I stood frozen as Cole moved with ruthless efficiency, shutting down all the security cameras in the penthouse, resetting the private elevator code, sliding a small pistol into a hidden pocket of a leather travel case, and finally taking my hand to pull me out of the apartment with the ease of someone who had done this 100 times. No one spoke in the elevator or the hallway below. Every sound felt unnervingly loud: the click of the elevator button, the heavy door closing behind us, the engine humming to life in the garage. I felt like I had been dropped into a film where someone forgot to give me the script. In the car, Cole turned to me. You need to wipe every communication app from your phone. No messages, no calls, no social media. If you need to say something, say it directly to me. I nodded, my hands trembling as I deleted each familiar icon, feeling as if every tap peeled away another fragment of the life I once had. Cole handed me a different phone stripped of a camera and contacts with only a single emergency call button pre-programmed. From now on, this is the only way for you to reach out if you get separated. I stared at the empty screen, feeling hollow. Where are we going? To a safe place. Somewhere no one knows. No cell service, no internet. A house in the northern woods built like a bunker, not listed under any name. We will stay there a few days, until everything calms down. I closed my eyes and took a long breath. I had thought I was familiar with running. But this time was different. This time I was not only running from Ryan, I was running from a world that now believed the wrong story about me. And the most frightening part was that I was no longer running alone. I was running beside a man I was not sure I could fully trust, yet he was the only one standing between me and the storm waiting ahead. The house lay deep within the forest, far from any main road, wrapped in such a dense wall of trees that even a phone signal could not slip through. There were no cars, no city lights, only the rustle of wind and the scent of old pine wood soaked into every inch of the walls. A safe house, as Cole called it, but to me it felt like an entirely different world, a place where time slowed, where the eyes of the public could no longer track my every move. On the first day I barely spoke, still in my old clothes, my hair tied back, moving through the house like a shadow. Cole did not push me to talk, did not ask questions. He simply checked the security system's reset codes and moved past me from time to time, as though we were two strangers forced to share the same space. He slept in a room across the hallway, leaving the door slightly ajar. I knew because on nights when I could not sleep, I heard the steady sound of keyboard taps coming from his room, a quiet presence that steadied me more than I wanted to admit. On the second day, I woke early, cooked some eggs and made coffee, and set them on the kitchen counter. When Cole walked in, he paused for a moment, looking at the food, then nodded once. Thank you. Just two simple words, yet they loosened something in the silence between us. He ate quietly, while I sat across from him taking small bites, as though I were studying his mood. For the first time in days, I did not feel fear, only the natural caution of two people learning how much trust to offer each other. That afternoon, the power went out for several hours because the solar system malfunctioned. Cole climbed onto the roof to adjust the panels in the biting northern wind, while I stood below with a flashlight so he could see. We barely spoke yet. Our movements fell into an easy rhythm, as if we had known each other far longer than a few chaotic days. When he climbed down, dust covering his sleeves, I handed him a towel without thinking. He took it, and for the first time that day, his eyes softened when they met mine. On the third night, we sat together in the living room, the fire throwing warm streaks of light across the wooden ceiling. I held a blanket, Cole, a cup of tea. Outside, the darkness was thick and endless, but inside I felt a kind of safety I could not remember ever having. I glanced at him and hesitated before asking, "You are not bothered that I dragged you into all of this?" Cole did not answer immediately. He set his tea down, leaned back, eyes fixed on the fire. I lived too long in a world where everything could be controlled. Then you appeared and brought a chaos I never anticipated. I thought I would hate that. But instead, it reminded me that sometimes the things we cannot control are the ones that feel the most real. I fell quiet. In that moment, I no longer saw Cole Bennett as the powerful, calculating man he showed the world. I saw a person, someone like me, searching for a reason to believe there was still something worth holding on to in the middle of all this turmoil. I do not know who moved first, only that when my head came to rest on his shoulder, something inside me loosened, uncoiling a tightness I had carried for far too long. No defenses, no distance. Cole did not hold me or speak. He simply allowed it, offering his shoulder for one night. And it was then I understood that trust does not begin with promises. It begins with silence that is allowed to exist, with staying when one has every right to walk away. And in that safe house across 3 days of isolation and shadowed woods, it was the first place where I truly began to believe that perhaps I was no longer alone. It rained through the night, each drop striking the wooden roof and glass panes, like someone tapping at memories I had tried to bury. And though Cole and I spoke little after the evening, before the silence between us no longer felt suffocating, but instead like an unspoken agreement between two people beginning to understand each other. On the fourth morning at the safe house, I found Cole sitting alone on the back porch, holding a cup of cold coffee in one hand, while the other turned a small silver ring on his middle finger, unlike anything I had ever seen him wear. I approached quietly, stood behind him for a moment, then took the seat beside him. The rain had softened to a gentle patter, no longer the heavy drumming of the night before. I asked almost in a whisper what ring that was. He looked down at his hand, a shadow passing through his eyes, and after a moment he answered, "Someone from before. My former fiancé." I said nothing. I knew that if he chose to mention her, it meant he was ready to speak. He turned the ring once more and set it in his palm, holding it as though it were a fragile piece of something long lost. We were engaged for 2 months before she died. A car accident. On her way to see me. His voice did not waver, but his gaze drifted far away, as if pulled back to a moment he could never change. I remembered Lauren hinting about someone once, but I had never asked, knowing I had not earned the right to touch that kind of grief. Now I no longer needed to ask. Cole continued, speaking almost to himself. Her name was Claire. She was the only person who ever made me believe I could step out of the cold world I had built for myself. She laughed easily, talked too much, stubborn, the complete opposite of me. But because of that, I believed. I believed I could love. And one day, simply because I asked her to delay our meeting by 15 minutes, she left earlier, took a different route. And it happened. I turned to him and saw his eyes reddening, not with tears, but with emotions pressed down for far too long. I wanted to reach for his hand, but I was not sure I had the right. He looked at me, his guard lowered for the first time. "You know I do not carry this ring because I cannot forget. I carry it because I do not want to forgive myself. Some mistakes, even if you did not cause them directly, stay with you like a lifelong sentence, and sometimes holding on to them is the only way to remind yourself never to grow careless again." I nodded quietly. In that moment, I understood why Cole kept his distance, why he lived as though everything could vanish in the blink of an eye. He was not afraid of being hurt. He was afraid of hurting someone else, of letting attachment become the reason another person disappeared, like Claire. I exhaled softly and said, "Someone once told me that the things we cannot control are often the ones that feel the most real." Maybe. Claire does not need your forgiveness. Maybe she only needs to know you still remember. Cole looked at me longer than usual before giving a small nod, so slight that if I had not been watching closely, I would have missed it. He stood, slipped the ring into his pocket, and went back inside. I remained on the porch for a while, listening to the gentle rain tapping against the roof. My heart tangled in emotions I could not name, but I knew from that moment something had shifted between us. It was no longer an arrangement, no longer a performance. It was two people with two different heartbreaks beginning to share a piece of fragile peace in a world that rarely offered any. That afternoon, while I was tidying the small kitchen, Cole received a call from Marcus. He stepped out onto the back porch, closing the glass door behind him. Yet I could still watch the way his expression shifted in silence, not with panic or fear, but with a strained tension that tightened every line of his face, as if he were holding back something sharp enough to draw blood. When he came back inside, I knew something had happened. Cole set the phone on the table, did not sit, only leaned against the edge with his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on me. "Ryan has narrowed down the search to this forest. He hasn't found the exact coordinates yet, but he is getting too close. I went cold, my throat sealing shut, as though someone had reached inside and squeezed. How could he have known? This house did not exist on any record. Cole continued. Marcus thinks someone inside leaked information. Maybe a small link in the chain or a device that was not checked properly. Either way, we do not have much time. I stepped closer, my voice dropping. Then, what do we do now? Cole held my gaze for a long moment. I expected him to say we needed to leave immediately or move to another safe location. But instead, he said something that stunned me so completely I thought I had misheard. We need to get married. I stared at him, unable to process the words. What? He repeated, slow and deliberate, every syllable carrying the weight of a decision already made. A legal marriage. I could not understand. He looked at me no longer with his usual cold detachment, but with a seriousness tinged with something rare, something almost urgent. If we marry, you gain legal protection. No one, not even Ryan, can easily approach you or force you into anything, if you are my wife. Legal status. Marital protections, immunity in certain investigations. All of it blocks Ryan from using loopholes to hunt you. I stepped back, dizzy. He was speaking of marriage as if it were a contract, and of course that was exactly what it was. I knew Cole was not acting out of romance, not even after the quiet moments we had begun to share. His proposal was a strategy, a structure built out of law to shield me from the very system Ryan was twisting to destroy me. I swallowed, whispering, "And you, what do you gain?" Cole looked at me, his gaze so deep I had to turn away. He did not answer at once. After a breath, he finally said, "I do not like anyone touching what belongs to me. You got into my car, stepped into my life. And now I am not letting him take you back." I did not know how much of that was calculation, and how much was something raw or unspoken, but I knew I did not have many choices left. Another escape would not save me for long. Another shelter would only buy a few more days. I needed something strong enough to stop Ryan in his tracks. And strangely, when Cole spoke of marriage as a shield, I did not feel trapped. I felt chosen, claimed, as if I were stepping into a role where I finally held some measure of control, not in a fairy tale wedding, but in a pact forged by two people who understood exactly what they were fighting. I nodded, my voice barely a breath blending into the soft rain outside. All right, we will do it. Cole nodded, once his eyes remaining on me as if confirming I had not been coerced. Another call was made. Marcus would handle the paperwork that day. Someone he trusted would arrange a discreet signing at a small town hall in the southern part of Illinois. No wedding dress, no rings, no vows. Only one thing existed between us at that moment: a silent promise. I stood beside Cole as he placed his hand on my back and told the clerk that I was his wife. And for the first time, hearing those words did not feel foreign. Because I understood that whether by name or by circumstance, I had become part of Cole Bennett's world, and he had already become a part of mine in a way neither of us could step back from anymore. The town hall sat in a small community, nearly 3 hours outside Chicago, tucked between quiet roads and rows of maple trees beginning to change color. There were no flowers, no music, no family or friends to witness anything. It was just me, Cole, Marcus, and a weary-eyed middle-aged clerk whose gentle voice suggested he had overseen thousands of hurried marriages and somehow still carried a trace of reverence in every word he read. I wore a simple white dress Vanessa had quietly sent that morning, no makeup, my hair loosely pinned with an old clip. Cole stood beside me in a dark gray suit with an untied tie and the top button of his shirt undone, looking both polished and exhausted, though his eyes never left me for even a moment. When the clerk began reading the vows, I did not expect to feel anything. This was an arrangement, a means of survival, a strategic shelter. But when I heard him say, "By the authority granted by the laws of the state of Illinois, I now pronounce you legally married," something in my chest tightened. Not from fear, but from the realization that this moment was real. We had crossed through chases, threats, sleepless nights, and the weight of too many battles to stand here now. Not through love the way people imagine it, but through a trust shaped by wounds. The clerk looked at us and nodded softly. Now would be the time for the kiss if you wish. I turned to Cole, uncertain whether this part was required or just formality, but he did not let me linger in hesitation. He stepped closer, placed a hand at my waist, tilted his head and kissed me. It was not rushed or hollow or done simply for show. It was a real kiss, slow and steady, as if he had thought about it for far longer than either of us realized and only now allowed himself to act on it. His hand held me with a gentleness that was not weak, but sure, anchoring me in a way that made everything else fall away. There was no Ryan, no fabricated headlines, no eyes watching from the dark. There was only us, Cole and me. Two people carrying different kinds of hurt, finding each other in the middle of chaos. When he pulled away, his forehead rested against mine, his breath warm, faintly laced with the mint from his morning coffee. He whispered so softly I barely heard it. "From now on, you are mine. Not just on paper." I did not answer, not because I did not want to, but because my throat closed up. For the first time in years, I felt I belonged somewhere with no need to run or pretend to be stronger than I was. I only needed to stand here in this man's arms and believe that even in the fiercest storms one could still find a place to anchor their heart. When we stepped outside the town hall, a light rain had begun to fall. Cole opened the car door for me and shielded me with his coat. The rain chilled my hair and skin, but my heart was warm enough that I felt nothing but the steady rhythm beating inside my chest. I had just become the legal wife of Cole Bennett. And strangely, the most frightening part was not how fast it happened, but that I did not want to turn back. When we returned from the town hall, the rain was still falling in a thin, steady veil, the safe house hidden deep in the woods glowing with a warm amber light that seemed like the only anchor in a world tipping off balance. Cole barely spoke during the drive back, one hand resting loosely on the wheel, while his eyes kept drifting to me as though he needed to confirm that I was still there, still real. I sat silently in the passenger seat, one hand clutching the simple white dress I had worn, the other still remembering the pressure of his touch when he held my hand in front of the marriage clerk. We had become husband and wife on paper, yet something inside me was already reaching beyond the boundaries of legality. That night, I stepped out of the bathroom with my hair still damp, wearing one of Cole's shirts instead of my own sleepwear. He stood before the fireplace, holding a glass of wine, the flames casting warm shadows across the straight line of his nose and the quiet intensity in his eyes. When he turned to look at me, there was no surprise in his expression, no hesitation, only the stillness of a man who had been waiting for something for a very long time. I walked toward him slowly, feeling the beat of my own heart echo through my chest. There were no invitations spoken aloud, no words at all, only the meeting of eyes in a moment stripped of anything that once kept us guarded. When Cole set his glass aside and touched my cheek with a gentle hand, I leaned into that warmth with a strange sense of certainty. His mouth found mine, and this time it was not the kiss of ceremony or necessity, but the kiss of two people finally reaching each other after shedding layers of fear and distance. His hand slid to the back of my neck, holding me as though he feared I might vanish, and I wrapped my arms around him, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat matching mine. Nothing was rushed or frantic. Each gesture was measured, patient, as though we were learning to trust through the language of closeness itself. He lifted me with an ease that made my breath catch and carried me toward the large bed near the window. Outside, the rain continued its quiet fall, but inside the room there was only breath and heartbeat. Cole laid me down as though I were something precious, then settled beside me, his gaze never leaving mine. We spoke no words as his hand brushed my skin for the first time, the touch gentle, in a way that surprised me, so unlike the distant, controlled exterior he showed the world. Every movement was deliberate healing in its own way, as though he understood the invisible wounds I carried and was determined not to deepen them. And I let him not because I needed saving, but because I chose to let myself be held without pretending anymore. When he lay beside me afterward, one arm around my waist and the other threaded through my fingers over his chest, the room seemed to fall into a single shared breath. I turned to face him, the familiar scent of his skin surrounding me, and whispered almost too softly to hear that if this was a dream I did not want to wake. But Cole heard. He lowered his head and kissed my forehead, answering in the deep voice I had known since the first night he spoke to me in that SUV on a dark Chicago street. "This is not a dream. This is real. You are real." And in that moment, within those wooden walls, and the sound of rain beyond the porch, I knew I had truly come to belong to this man, not through vows or signatures, but through everything I had been, everything I had lost, and everything I was slowly becoming again. The next morning I woke in Cole's arms, my head resting against his chest, his breathing steady and his heartbeat firm, a quiet reminder that I no longer had to run. For the first time in many months, I did not jolt awake, did not check the windows or the hallway lights, did not hear phantom knocking as I had in so many recurring nightmares. I simply lay there still and unguarded, letting myself feel the presence of someone I knew would not vanish the moment I opened my eyes. After a simple breakfast of hot coffee and pastries that Cole insisted he could make better than I ever could, despite never having tried, Cole slid a secure, unfamiliar phone across the table. "I had Marcus reroute your old number through a proxy server," he said, his voice low with caution. "You can read your messages here without Ryan tracing the signal, but remember, do not reply directly. It is a one-way mirror for your safety." I picked up the device and saw dozens of unread messages, countless missed calls, most from names that had once been part of my life, but had been pushed away by Ryan's ruthless control. Among them was a message from Lily's old number, my closest friend from college, the one who held my hand when my mother died, the one who had sent hundreds of messages after I disappeared from social media, before slowly falling silent when she no longer knew what was truly happening to me. My heart tightened when I opened her newest message, only 3 small words. "Are you okay?" I sat still for a long time, my hand gripping the phone as memories of Lily washed through me, nights spent on apartment floors with cold pizza and youthful dreams. The disappointment in her eyes when I began to drift away, caught in Ryan's orbit, where no one could reach me. I had never answered the older messages because I had been afraid, ashamed, uncertain where to begin. But now I was different. I was no longer trapped in Ryan's lies or the invisible cage he had built around my life. I was the legal wife of Cole Bennett, and more importantly, I had begun to believe I deserved to reclaim my own life. I looked up at him, silent but pleading. Cole hesitated, then took the device from my hand and entered a rapid security code. "One time," he murmured, enabling an encrypted tunnel. "Make it fast." I typed a single line. "I am okay now, can you meet me?" Lily responded almost instantly. "Dear God, do not tell me this is real. When? Say when." That afternoon, Cole drove me to a small cafe in the suburbs where Lily sat waiting with hesitant eyes and hair shorter than I remembered. When I walked in, she stood, her gaze sweeping over me as if making sure I was still Emma, her friend, and not the shadow of a woman she once feared she had lost. I smiled softly, but it was the first smile in years that did not feel forced. She stepped forward and pulled me into a hug without needing any explanation. In Lily's arms, I knew I had begun a new journey, one without hiding or pretending. I told her everything, held nothing back about Ryan, the unraveling, the escape, and Cole. She did not interrupt, only listened with reddened eyes, her hand clasped around mine beneath the table. When I finally finished, she whispered, "I always knew you would find your way back to yourself, and I am glad you did not have to do it alone." On the drive home, Cole did not ask questions, only held my hand and gave a quiet, reassuring squeeze. When we stopped at a lookout above Lake Michigan, I turned toward him, touched his cheek with my wind-chilled fingers, and said softly, "I do not want to pretend to be anyone else anymore. I do not want to live like a shadow." Cole pressed his forehead to mine, his voice roughened with emotion. "Then do not. Live as yourself, and I will be here every step." That night I opened my laptop, created a new account, and posted my first photo in more than 2 years, just a picture of the sky above the wooden house with a single line beneath it. "I am still here, and this time I am not going to disappear again." The message from Marcus arrived early in the morning while Cole and I were making coffee in the kitchen, preparing for what felt like the first day in a long time, without fear sitting heavy in my chest. Cole glanced at the screen, his expression darkening for a brief second, but instead of speaking right away, he set a cup of coffee in front of me and took the seat across from mine. I looked at him, unease rising, and before I could ask, he spoke. "Ryan has disappeared." I froze. "What do you mean disappeared?" "Marcus received word from a contact inside the bureau. He is under formal investigation for financial fraud, stock manipulation, and ties to international money laundering." Last night, when the official summons was issued, Ryan was not at his residence, nor did he appear at any of his company offices. His entire security detail and personal drivers vanished at the same time. Some believe he fled the country. I set the cup down, my mind unraveling like tangled thread. I should have felt relieved. I should have felt grateful that justice had finally caught up and that the monster who terrorized my life could no longer manipulate anything or anyone. But the first thing I felt was emptiness. I had lived so long under the shadow of Ryan Callahan that the absence of his name, his presence, his threat, left me unsure of how to handle freedom now that it was within reach. Cole did not say anything. He stood, stepped behind me, and wrapped his arms around my shoulders, steady and grounding, a quiet shelter. He did not need to ask what was racing through my mind because he already understood. I sat silently for a long time, letting my thoughts run wild, before turning slowly to face him. If Ryan has truly fled, if he is no longer in the United States, it means I do not have to hide anymore. Cole gave a small nod. "You can leave here. You can go back to Chicago or anywhere you want. I will arrange everything for you. A new life, a new identity if you need it, a new job, a new place to live. Freedom." The word echoed through my mind like a stone dropped into still water. I had always believed that if I ever had a chance to be free again, I would seize it without hesitation. But now that it was here, real and undeniable, I did not want to leave. I looked at Cole, the man who had once been a mystery, someone I had feared, someone whose presence unsettled me. Yet he had become the only person with whom I felt truly safe, truly seen. "I do not want to go." His brow furrowed, disbelieving. "What do you mean?" "I do not need a new life. I need this one. I need exactly what I have right here. This house, this quiet, the wind through the trees, the mornings with coffee, and you. I have lived so long in fear that I finally understand what I want is not to escape, but to stay. For the first time, not because I am running, not because I am obligated, but because it is my choice." Cole said nothing for a moment. His eyes softened, his hands tightening on my shoulders before sliding down to pull me fully into his arms, as though trying to memorize every word I had just spoken. His voice dropped to a quiet rumble. "Do you know what you are saying?" "I do. And I do not regret it. Ryan may have disappeared, but you are here, and if there is anyone I want to begin again with, it is you." Cole lowered his forehead to mine, whispering like a vow without ceremony. "I cannot promise things will always be easy, but I promise I will be here. Whether you choose to stay or someday choose to go, I will still be here." I smiled in his embrace, a smile born not from habit or politeness, but from gratitude, from peace. Ryan may have vanished from my life, but more importantly, I no longer lived in his shadow. I had stepped out of it on my own feet, and I chose to stay, not to hide, but to begin. With Cole. With myself. With a life I would no longer allow anyone else to define. Dusk settled softly like a sheer silk scarf draped over the world, tinting the forest around the wooden house in warm shades of amber and fading gold. The trees shifted in color beneath the last light of day as a gentle breeze drifted through the slightly open window, carrying the scent of pine and the faint calls of late birds. I stood at the kitchen counter preparing a simple dinner for two, my hands trembling ever so slightly, even though my heart had already made its choice. Cole was outside on the porch fixing the loose hinge of the awning after the previous night's storm, his tall, steady figure silhouetted against the wood, as if he had always belonged to this quiet place. I watched him, and wondered when I had fallen in love with this man. Perhaps it was the first time he held my hand through a panic attack without demanding an explanation. Perhaps it was when I found him sitting alone with that old ring and the memories he never spoke aloud. Or perhaps it was on that rain-soaked night when he kissed me as if I were the only real thing left in a world built on lies. But the moment it happened no longer mattered. What mattered was that I knew now. I was not here out of obligation, nor because he had once offered me shelter in the chaos. I stayed because of him, because I wanted to. I stepped outside just as he finished putting away his tools, wiping his hands with a cloth, before looking at me with that familiar mix of surprise and quiet weariness. "You are not planning to let me handle all the chores around here, are you?" I smiled softly, though the tension beneath it was impossible to hide. "I need to talk to you." Cole's expression sharpened at once. He nodded, took a seat on the wooden chair by the porch, and gestured for me to sit across from him. But I did not sit. I stood before him, drew in a slow breath, and began. "I know everything between us started as an arrangement. A handshake between two people who needed each other at the right moment. I needed to escape, and you needed a reason to keep me close. And then everything went further than either of us planned. The marriage, the safe house, sharing a bed, the quiet breakfasts. None of it was mapped out. But I am here, Cole. And today I want to make something clear so you never have to wonder again. I choose you, not out of duty, not because of a marriage license, not because of fear of my past. I choose you because of who you are, because you saw me when everyone else turned their backs, because you never promised to save me but were always there when I needed someone. I love you." My voice shook at the final words, not out of fear of rejection, but because it was the first time in my life I had spoken them without hiding behind any mask. Cole said nothing for several long seconds. He looked at me as though committing every detail of my face, every sound of my confession to memory. Then he rose, stepping close until he stood directly in front of me. He did not touch me yet, just looked at me with a quiet intensity. "You know how I have lived. Careful. Guarded. Keeping everyone at arm's length. Because I lost someone. And I believed I could not survive losing anyone else. But then you arrived. You were unlike anyone I had ever met. You did not demand that I open my heart. You simply stood there quietly until I found myself wanting to keep you. And I do not want to hide from what I feel anymore. Because I chose you too, long ago." We stood there beneath the gentle glow of the setting sun, no longer divided by fear or uncertainty. Two people once broken by different pasts, finally meeting in the middle. I stepped closer and placed my hand against his chest, where his heart was beating just as fast as mine. And this time, when Cole bent down to kiss me, there was no hesitation, no shadow of doubt or pain. It was the kiss of two people in love, fully, honestly, bravely. No longer a dangerous arrangement, no longer a strange proposition, but two souls choosing each other after everything. And this time we kissed not to hold on to anything but to give ourselves to one another. Completely. Night descended gently like a velvet curtain settling over the forest surrounding the wooden house. The moon rising high and casting silver light onto the trembling branches of pine trees stirred by the cold October wind. The warm glow from the lantern on the balcony brushed across my face as I curled up on the wicker chair, wrapped in Cole's sweater, to keep the chill from slipping through the seams of my clothes. Cole brought out 2 glasses of red wine, set one on the wooden table before me, and sat across from me without a word. There was no need for words. After everything that had been spoken that afternoon, there was no distance left to fill between us. He simply sat there quiet, his gaze drifting at times toward the depths of the forest, and at times back to me as if he still could not believe I was truly here by choice, not out of fear or desperation, but because I wanted to be. A soft breeze brushed through my hair, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. I sipped my wine, the warmth spreading through my throat and into my chest. Cole rested one elbow on the arm of his chair, his other hand unconsciously threading through mine. "Does it feel strange to you?" He murmured, that 2 people from such different worlds would end up here together in a place like this on a night like this. I smiled faintly, my eyes lingering on the distant lights scattered far below the hillside. "I think we were never truly from different worlds. My world was simply too small before I met you. I used to think safety meant hiding in silence and acceptance, but now I understand that true safety is being myself and still being loved." Cole tightened his hold on my hand. "I grew up in a world built on negotiations, on silent dinners where my parents barely spoke, on relationships founded on benefits and falling apart the moment emotion entered the room. I learned to command everything, to control every step and decision so no one could ever hurt me again. Then you arrived, a step I never planned for. And I realized that sometimes the harder you hold on, the more likely you are to lose the most precious things." I turned to him. The moonlight softened the angles of his face, deepened his gaze, and made him look almost unbearably gentle. "I never thought I would love someone like you. A man whose silence carries weight, who can look directly at my scars without turning away. But I do. Not because you helped me escape Ryan, but because with you I feel like I matter, not for who I pretend to be, but for who I am." Cole brushed his fingers against my cheek, his eyes fixed on my lips as he whispered, "Then let me say this, not as the man who once saved you, not as the husband on paper, but as someone who loves you so deeply that he no longer knows who he is without you. I love you, Emma. And whatever your past holds, whatever our future becomes, I want to walk toward it with you step by step, day by day." I closed my eyes as his mouth met mine, gentle as a prayer. That night, on the small balcony in the middle of the forest, there were no longer 2 separate worlds, only one. A place where I no longer had to run, no longer had to apologize for existing, no longer had to shape myself to please anyone. A place where I was loved for who I truly was. And in the cold breath of autumn, beneath the wind and the moonlight, I knew one truth with absolute certainty. I had found home, not in a place, but in a person. Cole Bennett. Every morning since that night I have woken, not with a jolt at the slightest sound, not scanning the room to make sure the door was locked, or checking whether my phone still had enough battery to run if I needed to disappear. Instead, I wake in Cole's arms in a wooden house tucked deep in the forest, where the wind no longer signals danger, but breathes softly like the gentleness of nature itself. I make coffee. He repairs a loose board on the porch, and sometimes we simply sit beside each other without speaking, yet somehow still feel complete. This peace, if it had come before, I would never have believed I deserved it. But now I understand that no one is born to live forever in fear and shadows, or under the weight of someone else's control. Every person has the right to reclaim their freedom, no matter how painful that journey may be. It took me 2 long years to walk away from Ryan, but it took me a lifetime to learn how to love myself. Freedom is not only the absence of someone holding you down, It is the release from the fear that has lived inside you. Safety is not the absence of risk. It is being with someone who ensures you do not have to face those risks alone. And true love is not found in promises or extravagant gifts. It is in the quiet, steady presence of someone who chooses you every single day, the way Cole sits near me while I write, while I cook, or simply while I allow myself to live honestly again. Sometimes love does not arrive at the right time, does not follow any plan, and is far from perfect, yet it manages to save you in the truest way. My story is not merely about escaping a toxic relationship. It is a journey back toward myself. It is a reminder that you have the right to start over at any age in any circumstance, no matter how many times you have stumbled. If you are listening to this now, I believe there is something inside you that also needs healing. And if this story has touched your heart even just a little, I invite you to subscribe, to like, and to share it with someone you believe might need a moment of hope. Leave a comment below and tell us how this story made you feel, what you think of Emma of Cole, and which part reached you the most. Have you ever faced a moment when you had to choose between fear and freedom? Have you ever chosen love, not because you needed it, but because you truly wanted it? I would be honored to read your honest words from your heart to ours, because sometimes the smallest thing you share may become the greatest comfort to someone who desperately needs to hear it. Thank you for staying with this story all the way to the end. I look forward to seeing you in the next video, where more heartfelt and meaningful stories await you. I wish you good health, gentle peace, and a life filled with ease every single day. Goodbye, and until we meet again.